Hey there, fellow classic comic collectors. As always, I'm Scott Harris King, and today I'm back with part 4 of my complete run madness review of my complete run of Conan the Barbarian. Now, in part 1, we showed issues 1 to 24, the Barry Windsor Smith era. Part 2, we showed the beginning of the John Buscema era, which is issues 25 to 57. And then in part 3, we showed the Belit saga, the Queen of the Black Coast, the Pirate Queen. That ran from issues 58 to 100. So today, here in part 4, I'm going to be showing you Conan numbers 101 to 150 as we start a new era. Now, before I jump into that, just real quick, a couple things. On Saturday, October 5, so just tomorrow, basically, when this is being posted, I've got a convention. So if you happen to be in the area, I'm going to be at Athol, Mass, 10 o'clock to 3 o'clock. That show's running at the Athol Town Hall right next to the library. It's going to be me and a bunch of local indie creators. This is the third year we've been doing the show. I've been here all 3 years. It's a great little show. So if you're in the area, come on down, say hi, pick up some indie comics from me and the other people. It'll be a grand time. The other thing I wanted to mention, speaking of me making indie comics, is that my fantasy comic Quest number 4 is currently live on Kickstarter. The link will be down below, and you can pick up a set of all 4 issues at a special discounted rate if you haven't read them. So if this Conan video gets your juices pumping and you've got to get some cool swords and sorcery action, which is exactly why I'm doing this, because I'm so excited for making Quest that I've got to show off these fantasy comics that inspired me. But if this inspires you, you can check out my Kickstarter down below and get the hottest fantasy comic going, asterisk, that I'm making. So, enough about me. Let's talk about Conan. So here's issue 100. Now, we got the creative team still on board for most of this run here. It's Roy Thomas writing, John Buscema pencils. We've got a rotating cast of inkers coming in, and I'll say that I have not read a lot of these yet. So I'm going to go through these relatively quickly. One thing that I've noticed just sort of going through them is the inkers changing from one issue to the next, on the covers at least. John Buscema is doing for this a while. He's also been doing a lot of issues of Savage Sword of Conan. Obviously he is the legend, and he's sort of the definitive Conan artist. But there's a point here where his art to me starts to feel sort of less detailed. I don't want to say phoned in, but a lot of times with a lot of artists, as they get further and further into their career, their art gets simpler as they're sort of eliminating unnecessary things. And I've got a theory with these Conan issues, particularly the further we get into them, his art gets simpler. And I feel like the color printing job on these does not do them any service. I feel like a lot of these actually would look better in black and white, so you could really see his line work, because the simpler it gets and the simpler the inking gets and the blacks get, the more the color of the printing process here starts to overwhelm it a little. And so I feel like the art is not as good. The further we get into his run, the art starts to suffer more and more. But here's one of the covers that's not by him. Now, most of the covers here are, but there are a few. This is by Ernie Chan / Chua. There are a few covers by other people, and I'll be talking about those here. It's 105. This is a Buscema, and this has Bob Wyacek. This is Buscema with Bob Layton. Very different look to those 2 issues. I really like Layton's ink, actually, on this. This one is Buscema with Terry Austin, which has maybe not the scariest title for the story, The Snout in the Dark. I think we could have done a little bit better than that. This is Buscema. The inker is just signed B/L, so I'm not actually sure who that is. I don't recognize the ink either. So L. Who do you think L would be? I don't have my comics.org handy to look it up. Do you think maybe it's Leia Loa? I don't know. But 108, still some really cool covers. I'm gonna really like here 109, Sons of the Bear God. You know how much I love yellow covers, so that's a cool one. I always like this sort of mono color technique when they do that. That's 109. 110. We're in 1980 here, by the way. 110. Here's Conan fighting a bear. We've got a whole storyline, obviously. Beware the Bear of Heaven with the Bear God. 111. Now, these stories are still being adapted mostly from the original stories or from other later Conan novelizations by people other than Robert E. Howard. And then in between those stories, Roy Thomas is sometimes adapting other properties, but he's putting his own thing in here to fill in gaps because these are still going chronologically. He's still telling the chronological story of Conan's life. Here's another Bear God cover. It's 112. He's surrounded by Bear God people, I guess. Bear acolytes. 113. Satan had a son, but it's not the son of Satan. It looks like Sasquatch, actually. 113. 114. This is another Ernie Chan cover. Shadow of the Beast. And now we have 115. Now this is important. First of all, it's a double-sized special 10th anniversary issue. So this is, as it says right there, it's the 10th anniversary of Conan #1, cover dated October 1980. And of course, the first issue came out in 1970. A double-length novel by Roy Thomas, John Buscema, and Ernie Chan. Really great cover. Marred, of course, by this stupid blurb. But what are you going to do? Really important here because it's the last issue of the Roy Thomas era. So Roy Thomas has been writing the series the whole time. Issues 1 up to 115. And it's at this point in 1980 where he basically leaves Marvel and he goes over to DC, starts writing All-Star Squadron, which is his DC version of Invaders. And he very quickly launches Arak, the Son of Thunder, which is in a way his version of Conan. It takes place in our world. Well, I mean, Conan supposedly does too, but it's like prehistory. It's like whatever it is supposed to be. I don't know, 10,000 years ago, 15,000 years ago. Arak takes place more sort of like in the time of like Greek mythology. And so it's basically the idea behind Arak is that there's a Native American who ends up in Europe and makes his way down to like Rome and Greece and all through all this stuff. And so it's actually really interesting. It's pretty good. I've read the first 15 issues or so and I liked them, just not quite enough to collect the rest of it. But that's what Roy Thomas does after this. He's having disputes with Jim Shooter, like a lot of the old guard at Marvel were, and so he gets a deal to go over to DC, and he's a DC guy for the next several years after this issue. So what we get here with the next issue, 116, is we get an issue with written by Len Wein, and it says that this story takes place between Conan numbers 12 and 13. So we've already, like, Roy Thomas has been out the door for like 5 seconds, and they're already like going out of chronological order with this flashback story, but whatever. Here's 117. Now, my copy here is signed by Larry Hama, which I had completely forgotten about until I pulled it out here. And this looks like it's clearly a Buscema, on the pencils. I don't know who the inker is, but if you take a look, it's super finely detailed. It looks much more like the stuff from Savage Sword of Conan, and it looks so much better than a lot of the other John Buscema covers that I've been showing you. The inker really makes a big difference with these. You know, when Buscema inks himself, it's really good, but he's not doing that in a lot of these. And so, like, when you get a cover that's really well inked or interior really well inked, it makes a huge difference. So that's a really cool one. Here's 118, The Valley of Forever Night. Here's 119, which again has a very, very detailed inking style, which I think works really well for Conan. Now, I haven't read most of these in this era, and part of that reason is just because I just haven't got around to it. I have read some here and there, but it was like 30, 40 years ago at this point. So I'm just going to go through these relatively quickly. But what I've heard from people that have read all of these and are big Conan fans is that this is the era that they seem to like the least because they veer pretty far away from Howard and start putting in all sorts of just sort of random fantasy tropes and elements that don't really come from the world of Conan. And so for people that are big Conan fans, if some of this stuff feels very out of place, geography that doesn't make any sense, places that don't exist in the Howard universe, creatures and magic and different things that just don't fit in the feel of the Conan universe. That's what I've read anyway, from comments from other Conan fans that I've talked to online. So here's 123. I've heard some very disgruntled things about this particular era. 124. Uh, 125. $126. This is Buscema with Austin. Now, next issue, we have a sudden change. A change that's immediately obvious because Gil Kane takes over. Not just the covers, he's doing interiors for a while. Buscema leaves the book for a little while, and so we got Gil Kane. Now, Gil Kane is a big fantasy fan as well. He did like Black Mark, his own fantasy series, like in the late 60s. This is definitely, this is 1981, and as I was mentioning earlier, like as the artists are getting older, you see their styles become simpler in a lot of ways, but also more stylized. And so Kane's work on these covers is getting more and more stylized and more abstract. Now, it's very different from the Kane, when he was doing all the covers at Marvel in like 72, 73. What we're getting here from Kane is not that. It's much more stylized. Check out this Gil Kane cover. Look at the figure of Conan. I mean, I could still tell that it was Kane even without the signature, but it's very, very loose, very stylized. For me, not as sharp, but very interesting because he gets more and more stylized as he goes. Here's 131. Which is interesting because like the figure is very detailed, the wizard figure, but the Conan figure, again, is sort of simpler and more stylized. 132. I really like Gil Kane's work. But it's just interesting to see, like, look at the detail, like, on Conan when you look at up close at, like, his face and stuff. It's, yeah, it's almost abstract in some ways, some of his work here. 134. This is the last issue with Kane. The 135 is really interesting because it has a Walt Simonson cover with Conan fighting some kind of giant owl monster. Interiors are interesting as well. It's actually Mark Silvestri. Now, again, this is cover dated June of 82. So this is the beginning of 82 this is published. He would have been working on this right at the end of 81 with the lead time. And so this is several years before Mark Silvestri is sort of known and becomes known sort of in the late 80s. But here he is in one of his very early works with a Walt Simonson cover. So very interesting to me. That's 135. With 136, Buscema comes back to the book. It's obvious immediately from the cover art. And some of these I really like. You can really see, like on this one, 137, you can really see here the like the Alex Raymond influence, I want to say. Like you really get that. It's very strong here. I really like this cover actually quite a lot. It's really well done. Whereas some of the other ones, like that feels very strong in the line work to me. Some of the other ones not so much. Like I don't really love this one here, 138. Or the next one, 139. Although I do like the color scheme on this. 139. 140. Again, I don't have a ton to say about these because the ones I have read has been so long I don't remember them. But at some point I'm going to read through this whole run in order. 141. I do like these red covers as well as the yellow ones. They're very striking. 142, classic Conan trope. We've got a woman in a bikini that's chained to a thing. In this case, the Minotaur is there, and Conan is saving her. Color is very odd on this one. Everything's very muted with the color scheme. To me, as someone who is colorblind, there's not enough contrast here, so everything seems kind of muddy. I don't really love that. It's probably easier for you guys to see than me. 143. Uh, 144, I really like the composition of this cover. That sword Conan is holding is incredibly long. Like, I don't think there's any way that he would really be able to carry that because it's actually taller than him. But anyway, it doesn't matter. I really like the composition with Conan in shadows, and you just see this creepy monster arm. 145. Another bright red background. We get several of these into the next batch that we'll be showing in the next video. 146. Conan protecting a bevy of beauties, one of whom is wearing like a safari jacket. Her outfit just feels too modern, but whatever. 147, another classic Conan trope. We've seen this several times at this point of the run. Some kind of winged, evil winged creature flying off with a woman. We've seen this several times. Here's something a little different. It's an evil tree that's flying off with a woman. Well, not flying off, actually. It's turning Conan and his current paramour into trees. That's an interesting color scheme. It's a little bit weird for me with the greens and reds. 149, here's another vibrant red background. They really like this with these Conan covers, and I think it works really, really well. It sort of gives you the feeling of, the blood. We've got what appears to be some swamp zombies or something. I like this cover. It's a good one. And then here's 150. And because it's just a classic. There's snow, there's fire, there's Conan fighting a bunch of people in the snow and the fire. Well, of course, there's the woman in the bikini that he's protecting. And that's issue 150. So we're going to stop there for now. Next time I do a Conan, it might be a little bit. I've got some other stuff to show in the meantime. But when we get back to this run, we'll be doing, of course, issues 151 to 200. That's where I come in. So I'm a little unsure what my first issue is, but we'll be seeing it next time. I think it was around 167, 168. And then that's where we'll pick up where I started reading the series. And I'll have a little bit more to say during that section. But for now, that's it for this part of the run. Let me know what you think down below, and I'll see you next time.